Welcome to the No Limits Leadership Podcast. We discuss ancient wisdom, real-world experiences, and the latest concepts on mastering leadership of self and others. If you're committed to maximizing your life and your impact on the world, you're home. Welcome back to the No Limits Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Sean Patton, and we are doing a solo episode today so I can dive into one of the fundamental pillars of effective leadership: commitment. Now, we've all heard that actions speak louder than words, and nowhere is this more true than in leadership. Commitment isn't just a box to check. It's an essential trait that defines how leaders inspire, trust, motivate teams, and drive results. As you think about what commitment really looks like, I like to break it down into sort of three key aspects. The first is what I call mission first, people always. The second is developing team members. And the third is preparedness. So let's start with mission first, people always. Now, this is a common phrase that I learned as a young officer in the military. I would say that all the time. And at first, honestly, it was a little confusing to me. It's like, what do you, mission first, people always? It's almost like, well, if people are always, then how is mission first? And if mission's first, how is it people always? And it took me some experience and some application to really understand what this meant, that it was describing a fundamental balance between achieving organizational goals and taking care of the people who make those goals possible. Leaders' commitment doesn't just mean pushing for results at all costs. It's about knowing that people are your most valuable asset. Right? If you think about a leader who is so laser focused on achieving the mission that they neglect the well-being of their team, they may accomplish some sort of short-term gain, right? They may hit that first checkpoint, that first milestone, but it's going to be at the expense of long-term success. On the other side, leaders who, you probably met these people, they love their people. They're just that people person. They're walking around, they're on the floor, they're talking. They just care so much. They get emotional all the time. It's just, they're passionate and people love them. But that whole time, maybe they lose sight of the fact that there's a mission to be done. And so they end up kind of running around aimlessly, right? The balance is crucial. This is a both and approach. The mission must be clear and excellence should be the standard. But at the same time, the well-being, morale, and development of your team must be a top priority. A leader's commitment here, it creates a resilient, a motivated, and a high-performing team. A team that's aligned with mission and it's driven by purpose. What you'll find is that it's empowering. It allows your team to go full steam ahead. When they know the leader's looking out for them and has their best interest at heart, they can put full effort into accomplishing the mission. I'm sure you can think of examples in your own life of leaders and bosses and managers that have swung too far the people and the mission, right? They've swung too far to one side of this pendulum. I know I have, and I've been guilty at this at times too, because people also want to be a part of a winning team. And I've had employees where, I let them get away with things or behaving in a certain way or substandard performance too long, to the hindrance of mission, to the hindrance of the other people on the team. And when you do that, it starts to kill morale, starts to make people question the competence, one of the other four C's of the leader, the decision making. It's important to lay this out for your team very clearly. The mission has to come first. If not, what are we doing here? Right? It's if you run a business, sometimes you'll hear people in the streets, right? People before profits. I'm like, great idea, not a winning business strategy, right? But if it's profits above people, then you have this, evil empire business that's just stomping through people, that's not trying to do good in the world. No one's going to want to work for you. And I don't think it's a long-term recipe for success either. Just leaders showing commitment. To demonstrate commitment as a leader, it's mission first, people always. Make that your mantra. Now, let's look at the second key aspect of commitment: developing team members. Leadership isn't just about overseeing tasks and chasing short-term gains. It's about guiding people toward their long-term potential. A committed leader is one who sees their team members not as cogs in a machine, but as individuals with untapped potential. This is really a management versus leadership concept. Ultimately, I say we judge leaders on the leaders they create. Right? In sports, there's a thing called a coaching tree, right? For those of you who maybe aren't familiar with a coaching tree, it's a very simple concept. It just means it's a tracker of how many of a specific head coaches, former assistant coaches, eventually get hired as head coaches themselves. And it's a mark of coaching excellence. The same applies in business. You look at great leaders, just like great coaches, you'll see that the people who work for them go on to achieve greatness themselves, achieve important, impactful things, maybe inside that company or outside that company. Right? I know as a business owner myself, when I see people that work for me or people that are on my teams move on to do other bigger, greater things, there's nothing that is more rewarding to see them develop. And as a leader, we have to show the commitment to invest in their people, right? It's so important that people feel valued. When leaders invest in their team's growth, they earn trust and loyalty. Committed leaders are dedicated to personal and professional growth. When you're in it for the long haul with your team, they'll go the extra mile for you. Managers focus on achieving immediate outcomes. I like to say that management is about the efficiency of a system. But leaders focus on unlocking long-term performance in individuals. When you show your team that you care about their development, they become more engaged, loyal, and resilient. That's why I'm a huge proponent of developmental coaching sessions instead of just performance evaluations, right? Performance evaluations by their very nature are past focused, right? They're strictly looking at, we wanted these outcomes. Here's the outcomes you got. Here's the ones you didn't. How do we fix that for outcomes, right? It's talking strictly about performance, but a developmental coaching session is more holistic, right? When you go to develop your people with a coaching session, you are reflecting on the past performance, but just as a way to tell the story about their current state. It's looking at what they do well, what they don't do well, what they're struggling with, where they want to go, what are their goals. And more importantly, a good coach and a good leader is creating an agreement inside that development plan. They're saying, you do these things and I'm going to do these things to support you. I'm going to provide accountability. I'm going to provide training. I'm going to provide more resources. Here are the things I'm going to do for you so you can be successful for us. It's a partnership. I'll tell you that, we called it counseling in the military. And we would do, monthly and quarterly counseling sessions. And I'll tell you of, my 14 years in the military, I can tell you maybe a handful, 5 or 6 instances, specific instances of things that one of my commanders told me in a counseling session that really stuck with me, that really landed an impact that I still remember to this day. Not that many, considering how many counseling sessions I had, if I was having them almost monthly. We're supposed to have them monthly. But just like the, business, civilian, nonprofit, whatever, organization you're in, just because they're supposed to do monthly counseling doesn't mean they actually do it all the time, right? And what I can tell you is, while I may not remember the specifics of very many of those counseling sessions, I can tell you exactly the commanders who actually took the time to do written counseling with me and the ones who said, You know what you need to do. Yeah, we talked about it in the hallway. Just kind of brush it off. Because you may be thinking, oh, I don't want to waste their time, or it's not that big of a deal. But it's a huge deal. Because what it shows is that you care about them. That just the fact that my leader, that my boss, that my commander took time when I wasn't around and sat down and thought about me, thought about what I was doing well, thought about what I could do better, thought about how he could support me. That created a bond because it showed commitment, not just to outcome, but to me as an individual. And I will tell you that the quality of that counseling or that coaching program, regular evaluations, is the difference I see, the biggest difference I probably see between high performing organizations and just okay ones. Is that the leaders, the managers have a structured program and they actually take the time to think through the development of their team. I would argue that for an organization to be truly great, they look at personally and professionally developing human beings as a core competency of their business. So if you're a leader inside of a business, I would strongly encourage you to look at your core competencies. We sell X, we provide this level of customer service. And somewhere in that main, mission statement, values, however you organize, your company's direction, add in there, we develop our people. If you see long-lasting, successful big companies, they have formal programs to develop people from the individual contributor level all the way up through senior executive. They invest in their human capital. So anyway, that's the second pillar. That's the second pillar of demonstrating commitment as a leader, is developing your team members. That's how you demonstrate the leadership trait of commit. Now the final pillar, preparedness. One of the quickest ways to lose your team's respect is to show up unprepared. When you arrive late, when you miss deadlines, or you come to meetings without doing your homework, you send a clear message that you don't value your team's time. On the other hand, leaders who are consistently prepared demonstrate commitment to the mission and to their team. They do the work ahead of time and they show up ready to perform. This kind of commitment creates a culture of accountability and excellence. One of the most impactful lessons I've learned in leadership is that being prepared is a sign of respect to your team. So consequently, on the other hand, if you show up to meetings unprepared, not doing the pre-work, if you show up and say, what are we talking about today? Or you show up to a meeting and you're just reading data that you should have read beforehand, or having people report numbers that could just, again, could this meeting be an email? Could this have just been an Excel spreadsheet? Instead of showing up and saying, I reviewed the numbers that we sent out about your sales team's performance. Here are 3 things I noticed. Let's talk about those. Or here's my thoughts about that. Here's what we can do from there, and I want your feedback. Making those meetings productive, showing up ready for your day. It shows your team that you care enough to put in the work even when no one's watching. Because let's be honest, nothing derails a meeting faster than a leader who's scrambling to catch up in real time. We've got to do the pre-work. Take the time before meetings to prepare your thoughts, review materials, anticipate questions. You have to be punctual. Respect your team's time by starting and ending meetings on time. This shows that you value their contributions. And you have to model accountability. You have to hold yourself to this same high standard. None of us are perfect, and your team doesn't expect you to be perfect, but they do expect you to be honest. You have to be willing to admit when you've fallen short. Accountability starts at the top. As leaders, we can't show up consistently, 5-10 minutes late to, one-on-ones with our team. We have to show and demonstrate that we're ready, that we've done the pre-work, that we care about our people's time. One of the worst things you can do as a leader is waste your people's time. None of us have enough of it. You're probably putting way more on their plates than they can handle. And then when you show up late to a meeting, when you show up unprepared, when you have to ask for things, when they're waiting for you to catch up, what you're demonstrating to them is, I'm not committed to you. I'm not committed to this role. I'm not committed to doing my job. I'm not committed to being a professional. Professionals demonstrate commitment by being prepared. So 3 components of commitment that make leaders truly effective. Mission first, people always. Developing team members, and preparedness. By focusing on these principles, you not only earn the trust and respect of your team, but also create a culture of excellence and resilience. We have to remember that commitment isn't just about words, it's about actions. It's about showing up, being present, and leading with purpose. A committed leader inspires others to give their best because they know their work is valued and their leader is fully invested in the mission and the team. Thank you for joining me on this episode of No Limits Leadership. I hope you found this discussion valuable and you're inspired to lead with greater commitment. If you enjoyed this episode, all I'm asking, just share with somebody, right? Just tell a friend, text them, email them, send them the link, and let's spread the message of No Limits Leadership. Remember, when we unleash leadership, we unlock true potential.